Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of First State Unsolved. Today we're going over the oldest cold case currently in Delaware, and that's going to take us back to November 1960. So we're just going to jump right into it, no business or anything. Mrs. Pauline F. Money lived with her son, Leland F. Money Jr., on his farm located on Route 301 outside of Middletown. Money's daughter-in-law, Betty, and 4 grandchildren also occupied the home along with the family dog, Rex. The 62-year-old widow took over the right side of the 3-story, 11-bedroom house, and her son and his family lived on the left side. This arrangement allowed everyone to be close to one another, but also provided some, necessary separation for privacy, which is always needed. Leland was well known in the community and surrounding areas due to his farm, and Pauline was well liked and active in civic affairs. I wasn't able to pull up any information on Pauline's early life, and I don't have any other details on her prior to her murder. I do have access to multiple articles from November 1960, though, through newspapers.com. This is not sponsored by them in any way. I'm just really excited and hope that I'll be able to utilize that site for other older cases because there are plenty that predate the existence of social media, and they are likely to never have been really shared before. During the Tina Marie Louser episode, I mentioned that the cases of Mary Amelia Allen and Linda O'Day kind of sent me on a goose chase, and I just wrapped up writing up something for them, so that's exciting because I don't know why I was drawn to those two so much, but that's coming next season 3. And I have other older cases, again, that I'll be looking at, and hopefully I'll be able to get some work done for them. And maybe, just maybe, I'll be forced to take back some of the things that I've said about Delaware not reporting on crimes properly, but only time will tell. Okay, back to November 1960. On November 13th, 1960, just after 5 p.m., is the last time that anyone in Pauline's family would see her alive. Leland III, who was 14, was attending a youth function at church. Leland Jr., Betty, their daughter Carol, and sons James and Richard were all headed to Glasgow to visit relatives. As the family prepared to depart, Pauline was in her room packing for a trip to Florida that she would be taking the following week with some friends. Pauline was mentioning something about Christmas gifts for other family members, and Junior saw her writing some things down, and, she's kind of moving about, pacing in her room as he's saying goodbye to his mother. About an hour later, at roughly 6:15 p.m., Pauline was found lying on the floor of her kitchen by a couple from New Jersey who were passing by on their way home on Route 301. How did this random couple happen in her house? We'll get into that. Investigators believe that 2 barns on the property had been set on fire to try to cover up a bigger crime. Instead, those fires acted as a beacon and drew in the attention from the surrounding area. Mr. and Mrs. Asplund, I think that's how you say that, are the couple from New Jersey who spotted those 2 fires on the Money property. They pulled up to the home to try and alert anyone inside who may be unaware of what was happening. The pair were unable to get anyone's attention by banging on the front door, so they both ran around the back, and that's when they saw Pauline through the glass in the kitchen door. Being good Samaritans, they wanted to help, so they circled back to the front of the house and managed to break their way in. Arthur and his wife ran down a hallway to the kitchen and discovered that Pauline had been shot twice with a 12-gauge shotgun. She appeared to have been peeling vegetables at the kitchen sink when she was attacked. Though she was severely injured, Mrs. Money was still alive at this time. Pauline was lying face up on the floor and had a look of sheer terror on her face. Her clothes were splattered with blood and torn from what we can only assume was a struggle of some kind. Mrs. Money attempted to speak to the couple and mumbled what sounded like the name of one of her neighbors. That neighbor did fully cooperate with the investigation and was later cleared as a suspect after passing a polygraph test. Why she said his name, if she said his name, it's unclear. The fires had also gotten the attention of some neighbors who called the firehouse and demanded that trucks be sent right away. Firemen arrived after they received a call at 6:18 p.m., and the paramedics were then called after the firemen arrived and the chief became aware of Pauline's condition. Today, if you call 911 for a situation like this, they automatically send police, fire, and ambulance, or they ask, what do you need, police, fire, ambulance? 911 didn't take their first call until February 1968. So prior to all that, multiple calls had to be placed at different times once, needs were determined. By the time police and paramedics arrived, Pauline had passed away and was pronounced dead around 7:30 p.m. It didn't take long for a crowd of hundreds to assemble in the vicinity. Those who didn't gather around could still see the flames for miles. The damage caused by the inferno was estimated to be around $20,000 back in 1960. $20,000 then is about $208,000 today. So those fires caused a lot of damage. Autopsy results determined that the official cause of death was shock and hemorrhaging from the gunshot wounds to Mrs. Money's abdomen. Shotgun pellets were also found in her kidneys, stomach, and colon. Her hands were covered in pellet wounds, indicating that they had been thrown up in an attempt to block the blasts. She was trying to defend herself. An investigation of the scene ran late into the night and even into the early morning hours. And here are some of the details that were uncovered in that investigation. Parts of the Money home had been ransacked, and a bag of pennies had been stolen from one of the bedrooms of the children. Some coins would be discovered the next day along Route 301, and police believed that they were some of the ones that were stolen from the Money home. Firefighters even had to use a phone at one of the neighboring homes because they couldn't get through on the line at the Money residence either. This detail leads some to believe that the murder was premeditated. I don't know if I believe that, but I also don't have a theory as to why the phones would be cut either, so that's just a fact that we know. And do any of you remember the dog that I mentioned? Rex? Rex was the family's 3-year-old collie, but he was believed to have not been in the home or near the home at the time of the murder. When he eventually returned, he smelled like straight up skunk. So it's speculated that he was out in the surrounding woods at the time of the crime, chasing skunks. And apparently a third fire was attempted in the sleeping quarters of the migrant workers that were employed by the Moneys, but that fire was not successful. 2 bales of hay and a box of matches were found in the quarters, but I think the suspect may have panicked and didn't have enough time to set the third fire before he fled. Or, maybe they thought the fire ignited, but it just didn't have enough oomph to get going. These sleeping quarters were large enough to sleep 35 to 40 men, who Leland Jr. employed during the summer months. The quarters had been empty for several weeks because the migrant workers had left in early October. There were multiple indicators that at least one individual had been squatting on the Money property prior to the murder. Pauline's daughter-in-law had reported hearing noises inside of one of the vacant buildings a full month after the workers had gone. Another farm aide also reported hearing sneezes inside of the same building just a few days later. Mattresses that were previously left neatly stacked were found laid out on the floor, and lights had been left on. Empty food containers were strewn about, and tanks of propane gas had been used to heat the facilities. After too many incidents and coincidences, the family contacted Newcastle County Police to file a complaint. Officers did go out to the farm and attempted to detect intruders, but it seems they came up empty-handed at the time. 4 miles southwest of Middletown, Mrs. Mary Lockerman called to report that someone had been living in a machine shed behind her home. She also mentioned that she believed this individual had snuck in and taken food while no one was home at least twice. It sounds to me like there was a transient moving through town, and he did not do so very quietly or inconspicuously, apparently. One article from the Morning News theorized that the perpetrator rifled through belongings in the Money home upstairs first, and then may have either been startled or been recognized by Pauline as he attempted to exit the house. It is also speculated that the individual responsible may have been hiding in one of those buildings they later burned and watched the rest of the Money family leave the house. So they're in the sleeping quarters, they see the family leave, and after the coast was clear, the invader made their way into the home through an unlocked door. The unlocked door comment comes into play because there were no signs of forced entry other than where Mr. and Mrs. Asplund entered the home. There was also an alleged sighting of a large man leaping from a roof from one of the homes in the area just 10 days after the killing and arson took place. After the news of a possible suspect being sighted was released, a manhunt was launched by both Delaware and Maryland police, and that manhunt included the use of bloodhounds and the use of Delaware State Police plane. Nothing came of that search, and no suspect was ever named or apprehended. One thing that I didn't forget to mention was that after Leland, Betty, and the kids arrived in Glasgow, they were shocked to receive a phone call explaining that their property was on fire and that Mrs. Money had been attacked. Betty and the kids stayed behind, and Leland rushed home as fast as he could. When he arrived, the barns were still ablaze, and his mother was dead. And that is the cold case of Pauline Money. I gathered as many details as possible without using too much filler info. Some details I read had nothing to do with what happened to poor Pauline at all, so I just left them out entirely. The odds that this case will ever be solved are slim to none, but I felt that this woman's story still deserved to be told. I couldn't find any of the Money family online, at least not for certain, but I hope they are all doing well. I hope you enjoyed. I always hate saying that. I hope you found this episode informative. There we go. And if you thought nothing ever happened here, you thought wrong.